In this lecture, we will discuss string methods that we can use in Visual Basic.
We're now going to shift gears and look at several different methods and properties that are involved with strings. So the first property we're going to take a look at is the length property. This is pretty straightforward. In fact, it's very similar, if not identical, to the length property for arrays. This is just going to give us the number of characters in our string, just as how the length property for arrays gives the number of elements in the array. So let me give you an example here real quick. So let's say we declare a string variable str, and we set it equal to or assign it to the string Jack and Jill. And then we would have a message box appear where we would show the length of that string. So this is going to give us the number of characters in that string. So in this particular example, you see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lost count. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm counting 13, I think. 4, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 13. So this would give us 13 characters for our string. So that means our message box is going to display 13. One of the methods that we can use with strings is called the toUpper method. And this is pretty much the same thing as the toUpper method in Java, if you're familiar with that programming language. The idea with this method is we take all the characters of a string and we convert them into their uppercase equivalent. Now, if there's a character in there that's not a lowercase letter, then it just stays the same. But all the lowercase letters would be converted to uppercase. The big thing to keep note is that this is going to return a copy of the string. So what do I mean by that? When we invoke this method on a string variable or a string object, we're not actually changing that string variable. This method is going to return a completely different string with the new characters. So if you try to just print out the contents of the original string, it's still going to have the upper and lower case letters. You would need to take the result of the method in order to see the full uppercase string. So let me give you an example of how we would do this. So here's some code. We're basically using the same examples before. So we have Jack and Jill as our string in str. But now what we're doing is we're going to invoke the toUpper method onto str. So we see down here that we are doing str.toUpper. And we don't have to pass anything in here. This doesn't take any parameters or arguments. So we're invoking it on the string variable. That means that we are going to convert all the letters to uppercase, and then we return the resulting string. So this is going to print Jack and Jill is just now all of the characters, if they were lowercase, they're now going to be uppercase. We also have the toLower method, and you can probably guess what this method is going to do. Yeah, that's a good guess. This method is going to convert all of the characters in the string to lowercase letters. So if there were any uppercase letters, they now become lowercase letters. And just like the toUpper method, this is going to return a copy of the string. We're not actually changing the string itself. So we can use our same example from before, where we have Jack and Jill as our string. And if we were to call toLower, which we're doing here in the message box show method, what we would find is that both J's will now become lowercase. So what this means is it is going to display Jack and Jill. It's just now every single character in here is lowercase. And if the character does not have an uppercase version, it just stays as it is. The next method we're going to talk about is one that you most likely have not seen in other programming languages. This is what's called the trim method. The idea behind the trim method is that we're going to remove all the spaces that are either at the beginning of the string, at the end of the string, or even both. Essentially what we're doing is just removing all of the leading and trailing spaces such that the first and last characters of the string cannot be a space. And just like all of the other string methods we talked about so far, this is going to return a copy of the string. It doesn't actually modify the string itself. So let's take a look at an example to see how we would use this method. So here's some code. We have a string variable called str, and we are initializing it to the string. There are spaces, and notice that we do have spaces in here. We have one right here, and we have one right here at the end. Now there are spaces in the middle, and I should mention that the trim method does not remove any other spaces other than what's at the beginning or the end. So the fact there is a space between there and R and another space between R and spaces, those spaces will not be affected by the trim method. We only remove the ones at the beginning or at the end or both. So the next line is where we actually call the trim method. So we're calling that right here. And since this returns a copy of the string with the removed spaces, we'll store that in another string variable. So this is going to be strtd. So we're going to store it in there. And then we're going to display that string in a message box, which is done in the third line. So what this is going to do is it will display there are spaces. It's just now there are no leading spaces and there are no trailing spaces. The next method, called the remove method, is also a different method from what we've seen in other languages. The idea with this method is that we are going to remove selected characters from a string. The difference is how we go about removing those characters. So this method is going to take two integer parameters. The first integer is going to be the index of where we start removing characters. So notice we haven't mentioned anything about exactly what character to remove. We're not worried about that. We're just going to say, let's remove a set of characters within a certain range, is what we're going to end up doing here. So this first parameter is going to be the starting index of where we start removing characters. The second parameter is the number of characters to remove. Okay, number of characters. It's not the ending index. It's very common for people to think that the first parameter is the starting index and the second integer is the ending index. That's not true. It is how many characters from the starting point we're going to remove characters. And just like the other string methods, this is going to return a copy of the string. So once again, we're not modifying the original string. We're going to make changes and then store that. Well, we should store that in another string, but we're going to return the resulting string instead of overwriting the original string. Here is an example of where we would use the remove method. So let's say we have a string str and it's initially hardly working. So then we're going to call the remove method and we're going to pass 4 and 2. And what this is saying is that our starting index is going to be 4 and then we're going to remove 2 characters starting from that position. So that means we need to find index 4. Well, we got to remember, just like with arrays, the first index of a string is going to be 0. So in this case, H is index 0, A is index 1, R is index 2, D is index 3. So L right here is going to be index 4. Well, that's close enough to be pointed to the L. And since we're going to remove 2 characters, that means we're going to move the L and Y. These 2 characters right here will be just completely removed. And then all the other characters will be shoved in. So it's not like there's going to be spaces in place of that. It's just going to be completely taken out of our string. So what that means is after removing the L and the Y from this string, the resulting string is going to be hard working.